This tomorrow, Chile will go to vote for the second time in 2 years on a new constitution. Yet, for many of those in the West, we always think about our countries generally having a constitution that has lasted sometimes for decades, sometimes for hundreds of years. And while there's always countries who stand out, Chile stands out more than most right now. This is because, as a country, Chile has generally been relatively stable. There have been protests, there has been dictatorships at certain points, there has been democracy, but there hasn't really been civil war in Chile, at least not to the extent that we have seen in some other countries as of late that are going through similar struggles with their own sense of identity, their own laws, their own government, the very fabric of society. So, let's start by getting into some background. First off, in 2021, we had two very important elections. We had the presidential elections and the general elections in Chile, which saw the election of Gabriel Boric, who is a left-wing democratic socialist, and he was victorious the first time that the left was victorious in Chile for about a decade. And under his administration, Chile had quickly passed a bunch of new laws that had made taxes higher on the rich, increased social spending, and a lot of progressive social legislation, particularly on LGBTQ plus rights and on native rights for native Chileans. Now, this wasn't without controversy, not at all. It was very controversial, especially since there had recently just been the election, and now you look at this diagram. Now, this diagram shows the composition of the legislature at the same time, just after the president's election. In the same election, both the president and the legislature were elected, and you'll see here a lot of different colors. Put simply, there are a ton of different Chilean political parties on the left or on the right, and you'll notice here that while there are many on both the left and the right, there are significantly more on the left. On the right, there were just a few major parties, just around three on the right for Chile's political spectrum. However, on the left, as you can see, there are tons of parties. There are parties with 2 seats, with 3 seats. There are tons of parties that the president had to negotiate with anytime he wanted something passed, and the legislature was very gridlocked. And in 2021, Chile elected a constitutional majority for the left, a supermajority, in fact, that rewrote Chile's constitution. And this is what this constitutional body looked like. Now, as you can see here, this is generally a pretty decently sized legislature. There are a lot of different representatives here, and there are not that many parties. It looks nothing like the previous picture that I just showed you. And this legislature was extremely left wing. It ranged from parties with Trotskyist elements or democratic socialist parties all the way to the center left, except the center left was actually on the center right in the legislature. According to Chilean law, a constitution needs roughly two-thirds of the representatives of the Constitutional Convention to draft a new constitution, which is then approved in a referendum. And because the right, led by the Let's Go Chile party or coalition, had fared so poorly in the previous elections in 2021, the left wing was able to propose their own constitution. Except there was one problem. Chile, like most Latin American countries, remains very populist. It has a very strong support base for left-wing economic policies, but on social policies, there is a lot of friction between the younger Chileans who generally are very much in favor of LGBTQ plus rights, of many other social reforms. However, for the conservatives in Chile, they really can rely on some backing, especially when it comes to things surrounding religion, such as abortion, or of course LGBTQ plus rights, which were a major focal point of this referendum. Now, the referendum ended up failing in pretty dramatic fashion. The left lost the referendum in a landslide, and the constitution that was written by them never came into force. Fast forward to 2023, and there was another election. This time, only three coalitions actually earned any seats. The three coalitions being Unity for Chile, which was the old combination of all the left of center parties from the old Constituent Unity Party over to the List of the People Party, and all these different ones, they all had to join together and they barely won just under a third of the seats. In the center of the legislature, the controlling votes were the Safe Chile Party, which was the continuation of the Let's Go Chile party. And this was actually a coalition of three different political parties, and they were going to hold that power, mostly because the far right Republican Party, with 23 seats, was able to win a plurality and, together with Safe Chile, had a two-thirds majority. Fast forward to tomorrow, and now you can see where we're at. This new constitutional supermajority of the Republican Party in Safe Chile meant that the left really had no veto power, similar to how the right had no veto power back in 2021. And just as the left saw their constitution rejected in a landslide due to the perceived overreaching of the left, it looks like the right is going to have a similar shock. Every single poll so far has had reject far out in the lead, ranging from just a 50% to 32% victory for the reject side, all the way up to a 71-29 reject victory. And these polls, even if they're not totally accurate, the margin of error really would have to be quite large for the reject side not to come out with a win. Which raises the next question: where do we go from here? Well, we know that Chilean politics are notoriously divided, especially on the left, between the various political parties, all ranging from traditional social democrats and social liberals all the way to democratic socialists, communists, Marxist Leninists, and Trotskyists. Now, this gridlock is probably not going to be solved anytime soon, just because with the end of a constitutional referendum comes the process of another constitutional referendum. And this is mainly because most sides agree that a new constitution is needed. Back in 2021, we saw this when nearly every single party, only certain factions of Let's Go Chile, were against it. Nearly every single party was in favor of a new constitution. They just disagreed upon a very left-wing constitution or a more centrist, socially liberal constitution that protected individual freedoms. And in 2023, the Unity for Chile and Safe Chile parties, which technically comprise a simple majority in the Constitutional Convention body, they still favored a new constitution, and even some members of the far right Republican Party still favored a constitution. And you're probably wondering right now, why was this constitution that Chile already has so controversial? Well, back in the days of 1980, when there was this guy named Auguste Pinochet, and Pinochet was very, very, very pro-US, very anti-communist, and he was a dictator, and he was propped up by the United States. And under Pinochet, Chile was not only a dictatorship, but they also were very socially conservative and very economically conservative. And more importantly, for the US anyways, at the time, they were very pro-free trade. Chile has quite a lot of natural resources, which they have at various points in their history had fighting over between various regions of Chile or between Chile and even other countries. And this free trade, socially conservative, economically conservative policies were very popular with both the US and also with the Chilean military. Now, when Pinochet was on his way out, when he lost the plebiscite to remain in power, his constitution allowed him to serve as the senator for life in Chile, as well as the chief of the army, a position that, according to Pinochet's constitution, could not be fired by the president. Now, there were changes to the Constitution, and those two were some of them. You no longer are able to be a senator for life in Chile. You no longer are able to be a chief of the army and not be fired by the president. The president can now fire you in Chile. However, there are many, many, many ways where the Constitution, seen by many, especially on the left, but also on the centrist side, are still going against individual liberty. And that's really what this is all about. There is general agreement in Chile that there is a new constitution that needs to be written. just not how it will be. And so tomorrow, assuming that the vote fails in Chile on a constitutional referendum, which all polls that have been released say it will, even by a margin as much as 40 percentage points, Chile is probably going to have to go back to the drawing board. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.